Begin the meeting, as always, with an acknowledgement. Just want to acknowledge that we're meeting today on the unceded traditional territories of the Comox First Nation, and that the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Service area includes the Coast Salish, Wakwakawak, and Nuu-Chah-Nulth territories. And before we get into the body of the meeting, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge a member of our staff, and this is want to take a moment to acknowledge the significant milestone for the board and for the CVRD, because today marks the final CSWM board meeting for our General Manager of Engineering, Mark Rutten, before he heads into a well-earned retirement, a large part of it to be spent on Hornby, I believe. So Mark joined the CVRD in August of 2009, some 16 years ago. At that time, he stepped in as our Senior Manager of Water and Wastewater, taking on the heavy lifting of water and sewer planning. By 2014, he took the helm as General Manager of Engineering. And for over 15 years with the CVRD, 12 years with CSWM, Mark has been a leader through our most challenging and rewarding times. And if you look at the evolution of CSWM services, Mark's impact is everywhere. He was instrumental in the implementation of the 2012 Solid Waste Management Plan, a roadmap that shifted us away from the dumping mindset of the past and towards environmental stewardship of the lands. And under his leadership, he left the complex work of bringing our legacy landfills in both Cumberland and Campbell River into environmental compliance. And these projects cemented our region's waste disposal future through the construction of a state-of-the-art engineered landfill, which included landfill gas capture and the commissioning of the leachate treatment plant. Under Mark's direction, we're now capturing methane that would have otherwise entered our atmosphere and treating runoff that could have impacted our watershed. Furthermore, Mark has been the driving force behind our ongoing work with Fortis to turn that captured landfill gas into a resource. Mark spent years navigating the technical and legal complexities of the landfill gas purchase agreement, a partnership that will eventually see our waste converted into renewable natural gas. It's a project that exemplifies his ability to translate board direction into almost reality at this point, taking a liability and eventually turning it into a community asset that can heat homes and reduce our carbon footprint for decades. He also steered one of our most ambitious regional achievements, the Regional Organics Composting Facility. He navigated that project through procurement hurdles at a very challenging time amidst the COVID pandemic, ensuring we have a system to divert food waste and extend the life of our landfill. But more importantly, Mark did the hard work behind the scenes with our municipal partners. He was the steady hand that balanced the diverse needs of our member municipalities with the collective goals of CSWM. Beyond the technical work, staff are going to miss is Mark's, the way he approaches his work. In a world which can often be quite loud, Mark has always brought with him a quiet commitment and sense of calm to the room, something I was just saying to James just yesterday. When we face our most challenging files, the ones with no easy answers, Mark was always there with sound reasoning and a level-headedness that gave the board confidence to move forward. So Mark, you leave the CVRD and the SWM in a far better place than you found it in 2009. The framework and the infrastructure you've built is largely buried underground where people cannot see it. But the stability you've given to CSWM service area is visible to all of us. You built a foundation that our communities will rely upon for decades to come, and that's a legacy to be incredibly proud of. So on behalf of the board, thank you for your service, your integrity, and your dedication. I mean, we wish you the best in your next chapter, and I think that Vivian was going to take a photograph, so I'm going to scoot over there, and we'll hold any applause until after the photograph is taken. If you scoot over, I was told in front of the flags.
Yeah.
Okay, Vivian? Are you taking?
Yeah. I don't think not quite gonna work. Yeah.
Okay.
Jake, do you want to photobomb it or?
Lobby. Eventually, we'll resume the meeting on March.
By the time you Photoshop it once.
Too high. You're too tall.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It's
I believe it's just the two of us.
Okay.
Snap a quick picture in spite of pressure.
I want to put this stuff at home. Get the whole board.
Oh, 100%. Thank you, Mark. Okay. And who said that we can't organize things effectively and efficiently in real time? Um, so thank you for your indulgence while we just take a moment to celebrate Mark, and we'll get now to the much more exciting business of adopting minutes. So this would be November 20th minutes for adoption. Thank you very much. Anyone opposed? Any questions? That carries. And we'll move right now into reports and start off with the recommended financial plan. I'll pass this over to James to introduce.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to the board and Happy New Year. We have presentation here from Kelly Broughton, our Manager of Financial Planning, and Vivian Shaw, Senior Manager of CSWM Services, related to the recommended financial plan. And Vivian, I'll turn it over to you to begin.
Oh, sorry. Morning. Thank you so much. And Happy New Year. We're going to be presenting the presentation for the financial plan, which I think Lisa is bringing it up. I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Good morning. Vivian and I will be presenting the 2026 to 2030 recommended financial plan. In November 2025, the board reviewed and endorsed the proposed financial plan. The recommended budget before you today is not very different from the proposed budget. Updates include the 2025 projected surplus, and operational and capital carry forward projects from 2025 have been incorporated into the plan. Overall, the recommended budget has increased by approximately $1 million, which is largely due to these updates rather than new spending. We would also like to take this opportunity to mention that the fourth quarter budget to actual variance analysis will be presented at the March meeting. This report will also include a comprehensive breakdown of tipping fee revenue received by category. At this time, I will turn the presentation over to Vivian to cover the next few slides.
Thanks, Kelly. The 2026 operating budget is just under 22 million and represents a 6.5% increase, or the equivalent of 1.3 million from the 2025 approved budget. Taxation was maintained at 5.5 at the 2025 rate, which results in an updated tax rate of 0.108 per $1,000 of assessed values. The sales of revenue saw an increase of 2.1 million from 2025, and this includes tipping fees increases, which amounts to 1.9 million, which is due to an increase in both increased tonnage received and also the increases approved as part of the 2025 tipping fee bylaw, which was implemented in 2026. Just over 4 million was carried into the 2026 budget for projects that are in progress but not yet completed. The capital projects carried forward this year were just over 3.7 million, and 352,000 in operational initiatives were incorporated into the operational budget. The revised capital plan is 9.2 million. The tipping fee increases approved for January supports the overall allocation of the total revenue by user fees to increase to 69.4%. As you'll see, the 5 waste streams were adjusted, which will increase the total revenue by approximately $600,000 in new dollars, or which represents about a third of the 2.1% total increase. The remaining balance is projected to come in from increased volumes. Within the current plan, the taxation dollars remains constant at 5.5 million, which shows an annual decline in taxation as compared to revenue. So historically, the funding mix between the user fees and taxation was maintained at a 70 to 30% ratio. And you'll see that this ratio changes by 2030 as the tipping fee increases to cover about 73% of the funding. In 2026, as part of the development of the fiscal framework, and policies will be developed for the board to give direction for the desired funding model and user fees for the service. This is a look at the breakdown of the rates by category by year. In 2026, staff will continue to work on this tipping fee analysis for the service and bring forward the board recommendation for future rates. Revenue by material type will be reviewed and reported out as part of this project. This is the projection for 2026 in terms of both tonnage and revenue by category as shown as percentage of the overall budget. I just wanted to highlight we just noticed that there's an error in the second line item in the labeling. This is regular MSW that's coming from ICNI and self-haul sources. And this is to clarify that this is not coming from curbside contracts. While we have, again, as you can see, many material categories, revenue sources are heavily reliant on just the three waste streams. These account for 70% of the total revenue. This is MSW, ICNI households. So these are folks that are bringing in waste either through self-haul or through industrial, commercial, and institutional sources. And that amounts to 30%. Construction and demolition waste is the next highest category at 20%, and then the curbside contracts is at 11%. So as you can see, any fluctuation in these volumes, specifically the local construction market, will have a disproportionate impact on the bottom line. The two categories that you'll see with the $10 minimum, so that's the MSW self-haul and ICNI loads, as well as the yard waste. These are the flat rate loads that represent the highest volume of traffic, but the lowest revenue contributions. They amount to roughly about 8% of combined total revenue. As you can see, as we've noted in the past, these are particularly notable because it accounts for about only 4,375 tons and only 7% of revenue. So this category is something that we are looking further into for the next year's budget. In terms of the rest of the waste categories, they get diminishingly lower and lower. Some of the other categories contribute anywhere between 0 to 1% of the revenue, despite being a necessary service. So the most notable ones are asbestos and controlled waste. These have very low tonnages. They're at 31 tons and 149 tons respectively, and minuscule, negligible impact in the overall scheme of things. But these are necessary services that we do provide to the community. The next one is the drywall and clean wood. Again, these are high bulk items that are needed for handling for improved diversion. This is the same information as previously presented in the previous slide. This is just more of just a different viewpoint for those that are more visual. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kelly for the rest of the budget.
Thank you, Vivian. The majority of the changes between the proposed budget and the recommended are technical, including the estimated 2025 surplus and carry forward project amounts. The 2025 projected surplus is approximately 1.14 million. However, the year end is still very much a work in progress, and that could change. 352,000 of that amount has been brought into the operational budget to offset 2025 incomplete initiatives that were carried forward into 2026. Given the expectation of increased financial pressures in capital funding and operational expenses, the remaining unallocated surplus of 788,000 has been equally distributed between the capital works reserve and the future expenditure reserve, so approximately $394,000 in each. This method of allocation was chosen as it helps to provide balance between long-term planning, resiliency, and flexibility. Other minor changes were incurred in the administrative categories for items such as support services, materials and supplies, and updated debt servicing costs in the future years. There are not any new programs or changes to service levels included in this budget, and any items from the solid waste management plan will be brought forward separately for board discussion and feedback. The capital budget saw a $3.7 million increase since the proposed, bringing the total 2026 capital plan to $9.2 million. During the 2025 carry forward project review, some project efficiencies were identified and a few projects were adjusted where 2025 funding was already sufficient or the scope was refined. The capital plan includes investments in solid waste infrastructure, vehicles and equipment, landfill closure works, building improvements. In the proposed capital plan, the shredder in project number 1054 was earmarked to be traded in. However, to support regional growth of organic services, it was decided to repurpose the old machinery to be used as part of the expansion plans for the service. However, this did not increase the overall budget as we were creating efficiencies in some of the other projects. So it was just a reallocation of funding between a couple of the other projects. The financial plan highlights. As main goal of this financial planning cycle, the reserve plan incrementally increases reserve transfers to save and cover 52.9% of the 10.5 million of the estimated 19.8 million needed for the cell 3 projects. That project is budgeted in 2035. This plan maximizes the use of the reserves to fund the cell 3 expansion while keeping the corresponding debt below the 40% of the projected project cost. This, however, leaves the capital works reserve in a precarious position in 2035 with a projected closing balance of less than $1 million. The pages 8 and 9 of the staff report detail the other two reserves, but for this presentation, we only focused on the capital works reserve as far as the presentation goes. Over the next year, the policy development will help to guide the reserves and debt balances. So this leads us into the requisition. The requisition, as stated, remains flat at the $5.5 million. Based on the 2026 completed roll values, the rate per thousand drops to 0.108 per thousand, which is down slightly, about 0.002 cents per thousand from 2025. So basically, it's remained pretty much the same. This chart here just shows the apportionment between the participating areas, along with the assessed values for each one. So this is the median assessed values. We did receive an update this morning for the median assessed values for 2026 for the electoral areas, which we did not have at the time this was published. So that has been updated, and we will amend the appendixes online, and we will ensure that it's emailed to all of the directors so that they have the most updated version of it. So basically, the assessed values have resulted in savings for most areas of $1 or so per residential unit based on their median values. It goes from a high of, sorry, I have the updated one in front of me. So it goes from a high of $108.23 in Area B in the CVRD area down to a low of $17.41 per residential unit in the village of Zabalas. So just as a reminder, this is our fiscal sustainability framework and the strategy. The solid waste management plan and the fiscal policies will shape the future budgets. In 2026, finance staff will present a tipping fee analysis, costing methodologies, and draft fiscal policies to the board for discussion and feedback. Specifically, prudent debt management and adequate resources and disciplined funding policies will establish a stable foundation that supports the resiliency, flexibility, and affordability, enabling sustainable and realistic financial planning into the future. So some of the draft policies that we will be bringing forward over the next little while are the reserve policies, the debt management policy, tipping fee and funding model policies, and which will all, of course, lead into the long-term financial planning and capital planning. Thank you, and I will now turn over the presentation to Vivian for final thoughts.
So in summary, the recommended plan helps to maintain taxation at a stable rate, user fees so that they are allocated appropriately, build the reserves for future projects, future capital projects, and advances in our long-term financial planning. This is again reflected in the board direction that we received back in November of 2025. As such, staff are therefore recommending that the board approve option one, which is to approve the 2026-2023 2030 CSW recommended financial plan as presented. Thank you, and staff are here to answer your questions.
All right, thanks, Kelly and Vivian for the presentation. I'm just looking and I'm seeing first hand is online. Director Wally, please go ahead. Director Wally, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Mr.
Great.
Chair. I have 2 points I'd like to make. First of all, we were told several years ago that a $16 increase in tipping fees would reduce requisition by $1 million. And it's my view that if we plan to increase our tipping fees to $16 a year for the next 5 years or so, we could almost totally eliminate our requisition, which I think would be the proper way to go as it used to be in the past. So I'd like to see that change made in our plan. The second point I would like to raise is that rumor had it that the Comox Valley Regional District had employed some asset management folks. Is that a fact?
I'll pass that to Arcia to respond on the asset management piece and then.
Thanks, Director. Yeah, the CVRD does have some asset management resources, and asset management is an activity that all of our services undertake at varying levels. The CVRD board has had several discussions over the past couple of months about the asset management program and resources that would be supportable within those services. That's still an ongoing discussion that the CVRD board is having. Specific to the CSWM board, there was discussion, I think, and presentation around the recommended resources at the proposed financial plan discussions. And so we can get more specific about that if you were looking for those specifics, but I'm not sure if that answers your question there, Director Wally.
Well, my question basically was, would that impact the requisition on our solid waste function?
So the proposed financial plan for solid waste does include some consideration for asset management and resources associated with that. The requisition itself, as been presented, it's stable at that 5.5 million tax requisition.
Yeah, I understand that. No, I just thought that perhaps the downloading of asset management onto solid waste was not appropriate. Anyway, that's my feelings on it. Thank you.
Director Wally, you've shared a comment about wishing to see tipping fees and requisition rebalanced. Are you, anyway, if you wish to make a motion to that effect, please go ahead, but that was your initial point. So unless staff have any comments to make on that front. Looks like not. All right, I'll go next to Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I'll have comment on the overall budget and one on what may seem like a minor one for the rest of the board, but a major one for one of my areas. So overall, yeah, I think 6.3% is a little higher than anticipated. I think we continue to struggle at local government to cost contain. And I think along, we've had some healthy discussions dating back to last spring in terms of shifting the burden a little more to tipping fees. And it would have been nice to see a couple of options, or at least one option, of a higher increase in tipping fees to bring that number. This board has never established a long-term target around, percentage increases to the budget. It might be good to do in the future strategic planning session. I think 5% would be quite reasonable. And I'm wondering along the lines of Dr. Wally, if an increase in tipping fees, if we ask for that option to be represented at this table, whether the board could actually weigh that up. So I'd be prepared to support a motion in that direction before we finalize budget. The more minor point for the board, if I'm allowed, is at the last meeting, there was a sort of a discussion and requests from the Cortez area in the Strathcona Regional District. And after 7 years in office, I was quite dismayed that I totally missed how we were managing our rural facilities outside of our main depot. And I guess what I found out is that it seems like that Cortez facility and probably more are fully funded by the service. And staff did make a mention that Hornby was in a very unique situation where only the residents of Hornby pay for the facility on Hornby. That's a major item on Hornby Island. It's $400,000 a year. And so with having heard staff recognize that there's been a historical inequity and my lack of awareness of that, I'm just wondering if I could ask if it would be appropriate to consider a contribution, to start a contribution from the service to the Hornby service moving forward and perhaps included in this budget. I don't think the full 400,000 would be appropriate, but I think I'd like to see an option or at least have a discussion or a staff report or other board members weighing in. It feels really unfair that one jurisdiction only their small, pool of residents pay, whereas in the rest of our service, it's held by the entire service. So I'm wondering if staff could comment on that, if there would be an opportunity to consider a contribution to the Hornby service as part of this budget. And I'll also note that, I'm going to hear from Mark Rutten on this pretty quick as a resident of Hornby Island. He'll definitely going to be sending me some emails on that.
Yeah, you'll be getting some informed commentary from Mark on that. We are still on receipt, as it were. So we don't have a so why don't we have a motion for receipt? There we go. Now we're on receipt. So Director Arbor spoke of making a motion. Not seeing any other speakers. Okay, Director Kerr.
Just really quickly, just slide 3, the funding mix. Again, I really appreciate the slide and seeing the trend. I guess the question is the plan, and this is a little about what Director Wally was talking about, is the plan to just gradually keep going down until it's 100% zero, or after 2030, what's the plan? Thanks.
Kelly, certainly, if you want to speak to the fiscal strategy, I think what I can say at the outset is that the direction we've received from the board is to maintain the taxation at that $5.5 million level. And in order to be able to respond to increasing costs in the service, the difference to make that up would be an increase in tipping fees, sales service. And so you're right, over time, that percent of revenue from sales service will increase. From a long-term perspective, that's where I think the fiscal strategies, the fiscal sustainability framework that Kelly can speak to can help the board understand how we're going to approach that over time. The solid waste management plan is a tremendous component of that strategy to build the foundation. So Kelly, maybe a little bit more on the fiscal framework.
So a big part of our work plan for 2026 that you heard us talk about is the policy development that's going to come forward. And those policies include the tipping fee analysis and a funding model. What does the funding look like? Although right now we've got this historical funding mix of the 70-30 requisition to tipping fee, that's never been a formal motion to have that. It's just been a practice that's been followed. So part of our analysis that we're going to be bringing forward is what are the different funding options and what do they look like? What does it look like if it's 100% funded by a tax requisition or by tipping fees? Where's the balance? And that's ultimately a decision that the directors will make based on the information that we can provide on it. And there's pros and cons. There's a variety of them. We don't want to go down that rabbit hole today because we could be here for hours just discussing that. So it's going to be part of our future policy work that we bring in. And, as I said, we can slice and dice it 1,000 different ways, but it will be a major part of what's coming in 2026.
All right, thanks very much, Kelly. And I'll go next to Director McCollum.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report. Yeah, I have just some questions, comments around how we're receiving the information around the organics service revenues and tipping fees. And just basically an explanation of what types of information I think would be helpful for the board currently and in future in terms of making decisions around this question of tipping fees in terms of both the landfill service and organics. And since we've brought this service on, we've had tipping fees lumped together as one line item in the financial plan or in the budget as it's presented, which it still is displayed that way in today's report. And we have been getting supplemental information about it. I mean, it is broken out in several collect, and so we don't really know if that's going to be an up or down. And next year when we look at the budget, we stand what that is unless we get a supplemental table. Volumes are with organics, just like we do with the solid waste service. It's difficult to tease out when we only have that information provided in supplemental tables. Even with the surplus, I believe that most of the surplus, or that $700,000, I believe, is associated with tipping fees, but we don't know if that's mostly from landfill or organics or how that breaks down. And we're basically going to have these questions come up repeatedly unless we find a new way to display the numbers and present them. So after we are done with the discussion, I'd like to just ask the chair if I can make a motion around specific direction in having the revenues associated with organics presented separately for future financial discussions, just for clarity for how the board comes at these decisions. Thanks.
Thanks, Director McCollum, and I appreciate you raising this before the meeting. And I'd be entirely open to receiving a motion to that effect. I think the data would be more effective for our discussions if we had that kind of breakdown. So, all right. So we've had discussion of several motions. So Lucy, did you want to speak? Yeah, please go ahead. Let me just get your mic on.
Thank you, through the chair. Just really quickly, just one point that I would say to that: most completely understand what the needs and the wants are from a financial services perspective. Just a bit more time to do what we need to do to be able to prepare and analyze that and bring that forward in how you're asking. And the only point that I just wanted to make to your comments, Director McCollum, is that as we go forward and we bring forward pieces of policy or determining how the service will be funded in total, etc., and then more specific on that organics program and the information that you're looking for, that when the user fee and charges policy comes and you're looking at the method on how you determine, so for each one of your lines of businesses, then how are you going to fund them? Because we're doing this more globally at this point in time, and what you're asking for is that you break out organics, and there are other lines of business as well. So our intent is to break out all of them, and we will make organics a high priority, so that as soon as we have that type of information more rolled out, then we'll bring it forward. When we do that as well, we just want to have conversations with the board to confirm, well, which information do you want to see? So when you're trying to determine where will the money come from in order to fund the services, which will be tipping fees or other user fees or some of your other programs that are associated, you may want to have higher degrees of individual use money coming in as opposed to some taxation. We would want to make sure that all of the type of information that you want and need in order to make those decisions, that we're bringing that to you. So we really look forward to those to those discussions as we come with your policy pieces that are around that. And absolutely, we want to ask further questions and confirm what is the decision-making information that this board wants. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lucy. And I mean, I think that's exactly what, I think we're well in alignment with what we want to see for future financial planning. And I think it'll make it a lot easier to map out what future tipping fees look like when we have a kind of more granular understanding of some of how these things come together. And just to kind of belabor this point further, I mean, currently in this discussion, especially because even looking backwards to last year, we don't know how much of the surplus came from which stream of waste. We don't know if what our current or last year's tipping fees, if they did cover the cost of the organics, or if next year is expected to, you know, contribute to capital costs, or if we're actually receiving a further subsidy from that tax requisition piece. And so that's kind of the challenge that we have, is that we don't really know if our tipping fee policy is supporting what our objectives are. So that's why I'm bringing it up again. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Director McCollum. And I don't know if you have a draft of the resolution that you were thinking about, if you were able to send it. I think Lisa's computer is not working so well, so maybe off to Jake would be really helpful. And we'll go to Director Mawhinney.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And I really appreciate this conversation. Lots of really great points that have been raised. And thank you to everyone for those. I have a question which was just around the rationale regarding the unallocated surplus of $788,000. And I noticed that it's the decision was to distribute it equally between the capital works reserve and the future expenditure reserve. But I also notice in this report that we expect debt servicing of $2.8 million this year. And I'm curious if it would be appropriate or possible to invest some or all of the surplus into making an extra debt payment. And I guess I'm asking that because I don't necessarily have a complete understanding of institutional borrowing, but looking at it from a consumer standpoint, often debt costs twice its value once the interest is factored in. So if we could potentially invest $500,000 now, we would be providing long-term savings of double that amount. And so I'm just looking for the rationale or considerations around that decision.
Sure. So it's really a two-part thing. I'll do the easiest part first for the debt, paying down the debt. Because we're locked into long-term debt through MFA, we cannot apply additional payments to it. It's a choice you make when you go into long-term debt. And once you're in the term, you're in the term. Now, during the terms, so we're in 20-year terms with them. And there are points where we make a decision, are we going to pay off that debt entirely? Or are we going to continue with it? So it's usually every 5 years when the rates are reset. We wouldn't be in a position to pay down any one of those long-term debt issues that we're in right now. So they will just continue, and we don't have the option of paying down additional payments. So it's kind of an all or nothing situation. As far as the choice we made to split it equally between the reserves, it's because both the future expenditure reserve and the capital works reserve, they need building up. They both are quite low for a service this size. To put it into the future expenditure reserve, we have a bit more flexibility there. We can use it for capital. We can use it for operating needs. We can use it for if something came up, some type of an emergency situation where we needed to have some additional funds right now, we can use those monies that are within the future expenditure reserve. Capital works reserves are a bit more restrictive, where we can only use them. They're defined by the bylaw to use them for capital betterments, renewals, future capital. So it's just harder to have that flexibility with them. We have, you know, a really expensive capital plan coming up. So the hope is, you know, every dollar that we can save and put into those reserves is going to better us in 2034 when we have to make that decision. What does our final funding mix look like for that cell 3 project? You know,
Okay, thank you for that explanation. That's really helpful.
yeah, one thing about the investment side of it though is that the reserves, they do get invested through our pooled investments through the CVRD. So they are always earning interest on the investments, right? They're not just sitting there not earning money, they are working at the same time.
All right, thanks for that, Kelly. I'll go to Director Arbor, and Director Arbor, if you do have a motion, I'm wondering if you might also be able to just send it on to Jake. I don't know, perhaps if you have that. Perfect, thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Well, then I don't need to speak.
What's that?
That's what I was gonna say, that I sent my.
Oh, okay, there you go. So,
Because I heard in regard.
all right, would you care to read it out for the group
Yes, certainly.
board?
And I want to add that that discussion was really useful to kind of adapt my thinking, and then I'm fine with pushing some of these items next year. But my motion, which I just sent to Lisa, oh, it's very simple. That staff brings back options prior to finalizing the budget for CSWM contributions to the Hornby Waste Management Facility starting in 2026, 2027. So that would be an additional motion to obviously the main motion, which is. Yes, certainly. I could do
Right.
that as a further that.
Okay, all right, so the main motion as is on the screen, with the addition, which I think Jake now has, and perhaps
Oh, I can send it to Jake. Does he?
well, maybe just wait a second so we can get it up on the screen, just so you can
Yeah.
take a clear look at it.
There you go, Jake.
It's the first meeting of the year. It takes a while for everything to warm up. Jake's really focusing and slightly grimacing. Do you want to maybe read that out one more time? And then Jake can transcribe it and someone can second it.
So it'd be the main motion that the recommended budget financial plan for Service 391 be approved. And further, that staff brings back options prior to finalizing the budget for contributions to the Hornby Waste Management Facility by CSWM starting in 2026-27.
Okay, seconded by Director Mawhinney.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm
Yeah, go
gonna speak to procedure on this one. I believe the recommendation here would be that the financial plan be approved, and there was not, this would direct then the financial plan to be incorporated in the overall regional district budget that would come to the CVRD for final adoption before the end of March. It wasn't intended that we would need to bring back this particular financial plan to a CSWM board meeting. So if the board is interested in understanding options related to a financial contribution to Hornby, I would suggest that that's a standalone motion. And then we would have to come back to the February meeting. It's on the calendar, February 5th, I believe it is. It's not a meeting that we would hold if we didn't need to come back in the financial plan.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. All I want to see is there's still a chance for this to be considered as part of the final budget for CSWM. That's what I'm trying to get at. So I guess you're saying with the mechanics, it might be better to have two motions just for clarity but this would still come back to this table.
If the board is interested in understanding the options around a contribution to the Hornby facility, then I would suggest that that is a motion on its own.
Okay.
And then once the board has had that consideration at the February meeting, the board could then consider approving the recommended financial plan
I'm
at
good
that
with
time.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Right. So,
Unless staff want to weigh in, I might be jumping ahead of things here, but between Lucy and Kelly, from a process perspective, I think I've got that right.
Yeah, we'll bring forward a report. This will also we'll have to take into consideration Denman as well. Because this will be a consideration of just in terms of equity and fairness as it relates to the convenience level standard that's being put forward as part of the solid waste management plan. So there is the base level of service that would be comparable to a Cortez, and then what's above and beyond. So it wouldn't be necessarily the full $400,000 that you spoke of, but it will be an analysis as to what would be considered as a comparable.
And maybe if I can just weigh in one more time here, and this is new information coming from Director Arbor. It's a discussion that's been had at different times in the past, so it's not something that we're not familiar with. But the concept at this stage in the financial plan process is new. It may be that there's opportunity from a reserve using the reserves to make such contribution, perhaps. And so, given that we are at the recommended financial plan stage, I'd be interested in more board discussion, but perhaps also if we could take a break just to understand the mechanics a little bit and then come back to the board with some options around that today. It might mean a 15-minute break during the meeting just to understand mechanics, because so much work has been put into this recommended financial plan at this stage, and there may be other ways to resolve this concern.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd say I do find, on reflection, the idea of approving the budget and then this an additional motion, which I guess would require, if that motion were approved in February for funding of Hornby, would require then going back and reopening the budget. So anyway, this is why we need 15 minutes, maybe for some discussion on process. So just going to beg the boards for sort of everyone just take a 10 to 15-minute break for a cup of tea or coffee, and we'll get back to this with a bit more clarity. So appreciate that. 2 minutes. Thanks so much for your, what says I'm muted? Hey, to folks online, we'll be coming back in about 2 minutes. Thanks for your patience. All right, folks, thanks for your patience. I think we're just going to get back to the meeting. Thank you very much. It's had a chance for staff to convene. So at this point, I'm just going to pass it over to our CAO, James Warren, to say a few words on just how we're going to move forward here.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, directors, for letting us take a moment to caucus there. So the couple of things. One, the resolution that has been put forward, or the motion that's been put forward, is twofold: is to approve the recommended financial plan, and also come back in February with options to make changes to the financial plan. So I'll speak to that a little bit more, but at the end of my remarks, I would suggest that the board withdraw that motion and come forward with a subsequent, either directing staff to come back in February or directing staff to come back mid-year, and I explain a little bit more about that, or directing that the financial plan be approved. So at the end of my remarks, I will ask that, suggest that the board might want to withdraw this motion and then put forward other considerations. The topics that Director Arbour raises, the relationship of contributions to the Hornby Island facility, it is something that is being considered through your solid waste management plan renewal process and the service level standards. And so there is conversation, discussion happening in that. And as the solid waste management plan gets through to approval, some of those inequities or opportunities would be addressed, and we would be looking to provide consistent service level standards across the CSWM service. So that was the intent, to be considering such contributions at this stage. It is in advance of the adopted approved solid waste management plan. So it's a little bit out of sequence in that way. If the board is interested in providing such contributions or considering options around providing such contributions to Hornby, I would suggest that you could direct staff to do so and to take a look at that analysis. And you can come back mid-year as opposed to before this financial plan is adopted, because it will give us time to be able to pull together the information that comes out of the solid waste management planning process, articulate that in a way for you to see what those impacts could be. And then any kind of contribution to Hornby could be made through the existing reserves, from the existing reserves in CSWM. It doesn't have to be done before the financial plan is adopted. I say that in part because being able to do this analysis and turn this around for the board prior to a special meeting on February 5th is going to be incredibly challenging for staff. This is today's recommended financial plan. It is based on what you've considered at previous meetings and presented in that way. So it would be incredibly challenging to return that to you, given other workloads and pressures with the other services that are under consideration for budget. But we could come back subsequent to the adoption of the plan and talk about contributions to Hornby to address the concerns that Director Arbour is raising. And any such contributions then would be made through a financial plan amendment to the solid waste management plan service. So I offer those thoughts and considerations. Staff are open to what you direct, and I would suggest that this motion could be withdrawn and then a subsequent motion put forward to either come back to the February meeting with analysis, and we'll do the best we can to do that in a meaningful way for you, or come back to the board. I'll say mid-year, but it doesn't have to be in June or July. It could be before that, and that would be to consider the solid waste management plan service level standards for the facilities. Or thirdly, the board could put forward the motion to adopt the recommended financial plan as it is. So, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much, CAO. So I'm going to just take that advice on procedure that we withdraw this and this motion that's currently on the floor, and then ask for the introduction of fresh recommendations. So I don't believe procedurally, do I need a, just to check to see if there's any opposition. All right, Director Wally, you have your hand up. That's not in opposition, is it?
No, Mr. Chair. Once you straighten out the current splitting of the motion, I have an amendment I would like to make.
Okay, I think it's going to be a withdrawal of this motion, in which case, seeing there's no objections, the motion is withdrawn. So we are now back on receipt. And I will open up the speakers list to the for fresh discussion. Director Wally, did you still wish to speak?
Yes, I wish to make an amendment to the recommended motion. Is that currently on the floor?
No, it's not. So you would need to make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I will move that in addition to what staff has put there as a recommended motion, that we amend that so that the financial plan be amended to increase the tipping fees by an additional $10 beginning in 2027 and each subsequent year until the requisition is eliminated.
All right, that's
Second.
moved. And sorry, so who seconded that?
Director Dahl.
Director Dahl. Okay, thanks very much. All right, so that's, sorry, I'm just proceed anyway. Director Dahl, did you have your hand up? Would you like to speak on this?
Yeah, can we do those as two motions? I support what Director Wally has brought forward, but I am not going to support this budget. I don't think that it's fair to our staff, and following what Director Wally said the first time he spoke, and Director Arbor, in Campbell River, we have a policy of a maximum of 3.5% tax increase year over year. And for it to be more than 3.5, our staff would have to come to council and ask for us to vary or waive that policy for a year. In Campbell River, in the last three budgets, we've been at 3.47, 2.89, and 2.70. So for us to be expecting our staff to do that and then support a 6.5% increase, I don't think is fair to our staff, and I definitely don't think it's fair to the taxpayers. So I won't be able to support the motion if it's done if the two motions are done together. So I'm asking that it could be split in two.
Okay, thanks, Director Dahl. I appreciate you explaining that. My understanding is that the premise of what you're saying is about the size of the tax increase. I'm just going to ask staff to clarify what the actual percentage tax is, because I believe it's below the number you're talking about. And once we get that information, I'll ask you if you still wanted to make that motion, because this seemed to be the fact that it was premised upon. So I'm going to pass it over to Kelly.
Yeah, Kelly, if you can,
Doing the best
cover
we
off
can
the
here.
tax increases.
Okay, so just to clarify, the tax increases, the tax requisition is remaining flat over last year. It's still at the $5.5 million. So as far as the tax requisition goes, it's a zero increase. The
All right.
balance is being made up through the tipping fee revenue.
Thanks, Kelly. I just wanted to clarify that was my understanding, make sure that was correct. So Director Dahl, based upon that, did you still wish to see the severance of the, are you asking still for severance?
No, I just didn't read this correctly where it says right at the very beginning that it's a 6.5% over 2025's approved budget. So I expected that would mean an increase to the requisition. So if the requisition for us stays the same, then I'm happy.
Yeah, I think that's good news. It's no increase in the requisition. All right. So we have the resolution. Oh, sorry, is that what's currently on the screen?
Mr. Chair, if I might just continue the wording there that kind of stalled on the screen.
Okay. So what we're going to do is, again, it's always helpful if people can email these to staff rather than us having to read them out in the meeting. But if you can slowly read out your recommendation, Director Wally, and Jake will transcribe it. We'll get, I believe, sorry, we have it seconded already.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It begins that the financial plan increased tipping fees by $10 beginning in 2027 and each succeeding year. Until the requisition is eliminated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anything further?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. And I just want to check with staff, is that an adequate degree of clarity given that it just speaks to tipping fees? Is that all tipping fees of every kind by $10? That's what I would assume this to mean. Is that what you're meaning, Dr. Wally?
That is correct.
Okay, every individual kind to be increased by $10. Okay, I'm gonna pass it over to the CAO for a comment, and then I'll go to directors.
Thanks, Chair. So I appreciate the resolution being put forward here, and I think I understand the intent behind it. This has impacts, of course, across the service, and most often when substantive direction like this is being considered, I would ask that we can come back to you with a report that would examine and explain such impacts. If the board were to adopt this as it is, I don't know that we would have a good understanding of what all those impacts would be. I'm not sure that the board would have a good understanding of what all those impacts would be. So typically I would see a motion, referral to staff to come back with analysis and consideration on this. I will also say that the tipping fee increase, the staff report that was considered in the fall, it contemplated increases, it contemplated adoption of your solid waste management plan renewal, and then coming back with a longer term, more robust analysis on your tipping fee structure, also tied into your fiscal framework. And so I can appreciate the intent here. My recommendation would be that this intent is brought back to you in the form of a report that we can provide an analysis on the impacts, both pros and cons.
All right, thanks very much. I'll go to Director McCollum.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I'm not opposed to what the idea is here in terms of transitioning out of a tax requisition and being more reliant on tipping fees going forward. But I share the concerns that I don't really feel like I have enough information to provide this direction. And the other question I had around that was, do we not have it in our work plan for this year that an analysis on tipping fees and how it would impact our reserves and how it relates to our new solid waste plan? It's my understanding that we do have a planned discussion around this later in the year, but maybe staff could clarify if I'm correct and what the timing of that would be if that is in fact the case.
Yeah, Kelly, can you speak to the timing of that? That your premise is correct there, Director, but Kelly, can you speak to the timing?
So all of that is included in our work plan for the coming in under the fiscal framework strategy. So there'd be the tipping fee analysis, full costing analysis, the revenue funding mix, how do we want that to look and what are the pros and cons of each type? So it will be coming in 2026.
Okay, and Lucy, please go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. Just from that perspective of timing and like overall and globally, we haven't mapped it totally out. Our my thoughts at this point in time is by the time June rolled around, that our intent or our goal, our target was to be able to come back to this board with a number of the very key policies, and one of those would be user fee and charges. And very top on my list is the that ties very heavily into your overall funding model for this service. So I think that's really important work for this board to get through as we go into the next planning cycle, so that we can have something in policy that guides the development of the next financial planning cycle. And along with that, of course, reserves and debts is very crucial as well. I do see a fair bit of work on this piece of funding, including user fees, taxations, and where we want that to go and what you want that to look like going forward. So those are the pieces for sure. We're looking at June, and at this point in time, I'm hopeful to have some pieces to you as March rolls around, your March meeting rolls around, to get that started, and then continue with that work as we get into June as well. Okay. However, don't think we have the whole thing all finished up by then, but that's what our plan looks like right now.
Okay, that's useful context. That's really helpful to hear, Lucy. Okay, so we have this motion on the floor, and if someone can remind me it's two parts. So it's to approve the financial plan. or it's just this one piece. Is anyone else wanting to speak on this? Okay, Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. I do appreciate the context and the interest in this motion in regards to the budget, because, you know, when we look at the budget, it doesn't really show those tipping fees increasing. And I think that is something that we at this board have spoken about a lot. I'm curious if the folks that made this motion would be interested in adjusting the motion to include, just to amend it, that this become a staff report analyzing the future outcomes of financial plan increases to tipping fees. Brett, I think I would be more in favor of supporting a motion that was sort of more framed in that context, rather than this very definitive decision here.
All right, thanks, Director Mawhinney. I'll go now to Director Davis online.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think we sort of had these conversations before. If we're leaning too heavily on tipping fees as opposed to requisition, we're going to see more illegal dumping out in the woods. And I think that's a real problem. So I think that's kind of why we have the formula that we have right now. Thanks.
All right, thanks very much. Director Morin, please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Excuse me, I think just to clarify what staff has said, it sounds like as part of the plan going forward, that's going to already come back to the board is analysis around, the pros and cons of raising the tipping fees and, the considerations that Director Davis just brought up as an example as well. So I guess I'm just asking for clarification if that is the case, that what's coming forward to us in the late spring or whenever that's going to be, that is going to include that analysis so that we can make the best decision going forward, rather than making a decision without all the information. If that's the case, I wouldn't support this motion even amended, because I'd prefer to wait for that information coming forward.
Yeah, that's correct, Director Morin.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. And so Director Wally, I see your hand up, but I don't know if you have a response to the suggestions regarding, the extra context regarding process. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I guess to air my frustration is this is the 20th year I've sat on this board, and this motion, ever since the day we began a tax requisition, has been put forwards. And understanding it takes a 6 months lead time before we can actually make any change, and that's why I said it to begin in 2027. But during those 20 years, we have sat through many analyses of what the impact would be of increasing tipping fees. In the meantime, our property taxpayers are subsidizing the actual people who commercially use this service. And I don't think that's appropriate. $10 is not a lot of money. And it would, over time, eliminate that requisition, which in my opinion shouldn't be there. As I understand it, it was created in the first place for some necessary capital expenditures that have since come and gone. And apart from the, what would you say, the ease of managing a system by having a pot of tax requisition, it's not necessary. We can build up enough reserves that if there's a fluctuation in the amount of tonnage that goes into our facility, then we can not have to initially make a big change to tax requisition. So I would prefer that, unless someone wants to make an amendment and change it, that we call the question on it. If it's defeated, then perhaps someone could make another motion that will analyze it again. But like I say, I've gone through many of these analyses, and $10 isn't very much. So thank you for that, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks, Director Wally. And Director Grieve, you haven't spoken yet. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would challenge Director Wally on his rationale. My recollection is, being at the time we were looking for borrowing through the MFA, and part of the prerequisite through apply for boring was some kind of a tax requisition, because we brought it back. The tax requisition bylaw was still there, to my knowledge, and we just reactivated it. But the rationale was to facilitate long-term borrowing. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, directors. So this this resolution is currently on the table. I'll speak briefly. Although I do support user pay as an overall concept, and I do see some value in increasing the tipping fees, I'd prefer, given that this resolution speaks of only introducing a change in 2027, that we just go through the process that staff have laid out before making this kind of change. And certainly at the end of that process, Director Wally, there would be another point, if it doesn't pass now, to make a resolution just like this. So at this point, I will call the question. All those in favor? Okay, I'm not saying. Dr. Lanyon, was that? I'm not sure if you could just, if you were in favor, if you could speak, that would be helpful.
Sure, yeah. No, I'm in favor of this.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Director Kerr was in online. That was, you're also in favor.
Also in favor.
And sorry, was that, who was that? Okay. I don't think we need a roll call vote, but if you're in favor, if you just say your name online, just to make sure we've registered everyone, because we can't see you all at once. Who was it who last spoke?
Director Ron Kerr.
Thank you. Anyone else? Director Wally, I assume you're in favor?
Director Wally's in favor.
Okay.
Director Dahl.
Director Dahl. Okay, thanks very much. I thought that might have been you. Okay. And I see, and those opposed? Okay, and that does not carry. But the opportunity for this motion is available, of course, later in the year, and would still be capable of impacting by 2027. All right, so we find ourselves still on receipt, and I will look at the board members for a motion. Okay, I heard Director McCollum moving the recommendation, seconded by Director Therrien. All right, any further questions or comments? Anyone opposed to the recommendation?
Wally's opposed.
Wally opposed? Thank you. Is there anyone else whose opposition we should note?
Dahl.
Dahl. Okay, thank you very much. All right, and that carries. And I just wanted to, I believe there may be some further motions, so I'll go first to Director McCollum. Your motion was sent to Jake, so he'll be able to pull that up. If you want to just read it out or speak to it.
I move that the board directs staff to provide the revenue and expenses associated with the operation of the organics facility to be presented separately from other revenues of the solid waste service.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any further comment? Anyone opposed? And that carries. Thank you. And Director Arbor, did you wish to go ahead?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciated that staff worked together to identify a pathway for Hornby, and I'm just a little bit torn on the suggested recommendation that came out of it. And maybe it's me always being paranoid, but we're coming at the end of our term, right? So you'll be facing a new board at next budget. It's taken me 7 years to find out about the reality of how different depots were funded. We now know, I think I haven't seen a lot of people questioning at the board that apparently something that's probably been going on since 2009 seems fairly inequitable in how different areas are treated. And it seems like the solution is simple. So I would still like to propose that we try to have staff come back with a couple of options for this year, for this year's budget. So I don't know if somebody would support a motion like that, if the board would contemplate it. I did hear staff as well talk about workload and all that, but honestly, I also heard that this is an issue they have been aware of. And it feels like presenting a couple of options to the board to start to address this situation would probably not be that onerous, even though if it's not the final resolution of the problem, even if there was a small amount given by this board to show at next budget that, you know, we're moving in a direction, that I would really appreciate that. Thanks.
Chair, so thanks, Director. And during the break, we did talk about a potential motion that could address your interest. And so Jake's pulled that up on the screen here. If the board is interested in presenting this or approving this, then staff would present a report to that effect, speaking to the service level standards.
All right, that is being moved and seconded. And just for everyone's benefit, I'll just read out the motion. If you could just minimize, thanks so much. So the staff be directed to bring back options and analysis respecting convenience service level standards for rural waste management facilities as developed for the draft solid waste management plan with consideration to a potential financial plan amendment in 2026. So a much more comprehensive and generalized request for staff reports on this. Any comments? It's been moved and seconded. Director Mawhinney.
Sorry, thank you. I was just curious if the convenience service level standard is, that sounds maybe a little bit more broad than what Director Arbor was seeking, but, or maybe that we're looking, convenience service level standard actually means funding level. Is that what that means?
I think the connection we're making is that work in the solid waste management plan renewal process, specific to the convenience service level standards, gets, I think, to the root of what Director Arbor is suggesting and commenting on. And so because of that work being done through the solid waste management planning process, that would be an appropriate set of information to bring back for the board to then give consideration around any potential contributions.
All right, and yeah, I was going to go to Director Chapman online and then back to Arbor. Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering, would it be more appropriate for us to say comeback options to reduce the requisition by $1.5 million and be more specific in what we're looking at? And I'd like to hear what Director Arbor has to say about that. But I agree with, we need to be more conscious about what we're doing with solid waste management. I think we need to be more focused on not only the revenue, but cost containment. And by reducing the requisition by $500,000, it would force a view of both revenue and expenditures. That's my thoughts.
Okay, Director Arbor, I'm not sure how that fits with your resolution, but
I think in the overall picture, I do agree with Director Chapman, and I think there's been comments around this table for it in favor of that. In regards specifically to Hornby, I think I appreciate Director Mawhinney's comments around the convenience service level, and I would note the motion doesn't even mention Hornby, but I think what that does is at least it would provide an opportunity to look at this when it comes back, and hopefully there will be board support to act on the amendment. And in regards to service level standards, Hornby has kind of gone like really heavy into the investment around the recycling facility. It's not comparable likely to Cortez. It's a very extensive kind of facility for recycling and repurposing and all of it, the rest of it. It's kind of best in class probably in BC, I would say. So I would not expect this board to pay for the full amount of what it's doing. And I think that's probably what staff has in mind in that reading of the convenience service level. But it should see more than $0 from this board if the other facilities are fully funded at the basic standard level, right? So that's what I'm hoping the options will indicate when this comes back. And then hopefully we can have a good board discussion and decision as to whether we want to correct that historical inequity. Thanks, Chair.
all right, thanks very much, Director Arbor. So I seeing no further speakers, I'm going to call the question. Is anyone opposed to this resolution? All right, and that carries unanimously. Thanks to everyone involved for finding a way to move things forward. And just a second. There's been a request to vary the agenda to move item 3 up, just based on the availability of the presenter. Do we need a board brief? Thank you. Moved and seconded. Right, well, on to 3. Thanks, everyone. So that's the solid waste management plan consultation update.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Board, for the varying the agenda. We have Sarah Willey, our Manager of Solid Waste Planning and Policy Development, who will be kicking off this presentation, and Colleen Dane from Zinc Strategies and Ingrid Sly, your CSWM Communication and Engagement Specialist, will both be supporting that presentation. We'll give Sarah just a moment to locate herself, and then turn the floor over to Sarah.
Thank you through the CEO to the chair. Appreciate the variance just to ensure timely use of Colleen's time here. Just before we introduce Colleen, though, I did want to take this opportunity. In the back, you may notice we've got an unfamiliar face. This is Liz Carter. Give us a wave, Liz. She's our joining us from the Strathcona Regional District as the First Nations liaison, and as this board's aware, we fund part of that position in Comox Strathcona Waste Management. So Liz has just joined us in December and is just familiarizing herself with our service today. So we're grateful that she's going to be able to bring that experience and help us to build relationships with our First Nations. So thank you for joining us today, Liz. Presenting with me today is Colleen Dane, Director at Zinc Strategies. We're going to be presenting on the solid waste management plan consultation that took place in the fall. And then also Ingrid Sly, the Communications and Engagement Specialist for CSWM, will be presenting on step 4, so our future look. Yeah, so it'll be a bit of a longer presentation. So thank you. Over to you, Colleen.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. No, there's a lot of important business. And for the introduction, Sarah, I appreciate it. I'm here just to give a bit of an overview on the What We Heard report for the community engagement and communications around step 3B of the solid waste management plan. So just as a bit of a scene setter, though, I know you all know well where we're at. Zinc joined the CSWM team, to support the communications for step 3B. Step 3, though, has been underway really since 2024, when the assessment of strategies was underway to identify actions. That went to the advisory committee in the spring of last year, and then here in kind of mid-year. And that was really kind of our start line for preparing to go out and talk to the community about the strategies and actions that have been approved by the board. This step is a really extensive and intensive step actually in solid waste management plans. It requires a lot of outreach to make sure that the community understands what is being proposed and what the impacts would be to them. And so I think the engagement plan that was created after that helped to set that tone. So the engagement question that we were presented with when we kind of kicked off at mid-year last year was, how do we collect input from the public about their level of support for actions and strategies that we were putting forward? And to do that, we understood that we needed to explain the strategies and the actions, introduce the actions, along with the qualifying factors, such as the cost and the diversion potential of each of those. So here you have some examples of just how we helped to break that down. And you'll see these carried throughout a roadmap that mapped out the 8 strategies that were being presented, and then each strategy really broken down into a summary of what that strategy was trying to achieve and the actions associated with it, along with kind of graphics to identify the cost and diversion potential and the most impacted communities as part of it. So although there is an engagement plan that was drafted kind of at the beginning of the solid waste management process for the plan overall, there was a separate engagement plan created specifically for step 3B. And the objectives in that plan that was created was we knew we wanted to inform the community about the SWMP and its objectives and the actions that will help support outcomes from it. We wanted to inform the community about how feedback would be received and considered and how community input would influence the final decision, which is what we're approaching soon. We wanted to involve the community through accessible opportunities for active engagement with clear feedback windows. So we wanted it to be easy for them to participate and easy for them to understand how and where and when they could participate. And then, potentially most importantly, we really wanted to consult with the community about the proposed strategies and their related actions, the cost impacts, and collect their comments and questions to be considered in the next steps of decision making. So the engagement strategy was really centered around 3 key means for collecting that input and comment, and those are through this gray bar on the slide: the online survey, the in-person events, and a series of presentations. And then they were supported by a significant series of promotional tools to raise awareness about those engagement opportunities. And that's what you can see across the bottom. Traditional media like press releases, posters in communities, postcards mailed out, print ads in local newspapers, and as well as community newsletters where that was an appropriate fit, social media promotion. The webpage was a very active place, direct mail to some of our rural communities, and then community support was where we saw people within those communities help kind of share it. So community associations, for example, would help promote the engagement opportunity as well. So it was a really busy time, a very hectic 6 weeks. So I'm going to talk through the results of the outreach at a high level for the online survey and in-person pieces further, but just, a couple quick facts. The online survey was open from the 2nd of September to mid-October. We had just about 625 responses, and it was supported by a recorded presentation on the website by the educator, Lindsay Eason, who helped kind of explain to people what they would be talking about in case they weren't able to talk to a member of the team in person. But there were lots of opportunities to talk to people in person as well, because there were 19 events hosted in 15 communities through that period, resulting in 1,247 interactions. And those in-person events took 4 formats, which I'll talk about a little bit more. And then Sarah and team presented to 7 different councils to raise awareness and draw attention to this important stage of engagement. So just with a high level overview about the in-person events, I need to kind of pause and just recognize what a significant effort this was by a whole bunch of people to be able to deliver this number of events. So Lindsay Eason, educator, Sarah, Ingrid, Vivian, everybody who participated, Mark also being at those events to help talk to the community. It really is an extraordinary amount of outreach, and I think really demonstrates the CSWM's genuine interest and effort in being able to get out and talk to each of the communities out there. So as I mentioned, each of the events, they took about 4 different formats roughly. So there was kind of your traditional open house where it was solely about this step 3B and the solid waste management plan. A whole bunch of boards, people could drop in and talk to the project team. We did those in Union Bay and in Cumberland. There was also a lot of focus on having a CSWM booth at outdoor events throughout the communities. So fall fairs, farmers markets, particularly for the islands, Hornby and Denman and Cortez and Quadra, but also at the Campbell River Home Show, which was a really big activity generator. We did outdoor events at CSWM facilities, so in the Comox Valley and Campbell River, but also others like Zabalis and Tassis. And then we also hosted pop-up booths or hallway awareness booths in common commercial or publicly accessible areas. So we would set up a booth, for example, in the middle of the malls here in the Valley or outside of Discovery Foods, Oyster River, to be able to try and reach those communities as well. Each format had its own needs for setup and its own amount of display area, and that took some customizing. We really loved Lindsay's little box. You can see the picture there where there was like a door for each of the strategies, and inside she had kind of tangible things that could talk about each of the actions that were being discussed, and that was a great way for her to be able to engage at those venues. But they all really followed that initial structure I showed at the beginning with the roadmap and then the breakdown of the different actions. The comments at all of these events were recorded and collated, and so that's where we've been able to pull some of the themes of feedback that I'll talk about. And visitors at those events were also encouraged to complete the online survey. So what did we see at those in-person events? As I mentioned, it was nearly 1,250 interactions. There was a pretty good split between the Comox Valley and the Comox Valley Regional District and the Strathcona Regional District. You can see at the top, kind of the 575 to 672. And there was also a nice balance between the rural and urban participation. So 54 and 59 for rural participation and 45 to 41 in the urban participation. Just because it might stand out, you can see the large piece of the pie for Campbell River on the right-hand side. That was really generated through the home show that just had a lot of activity and generated a lot of conversations. And so the general themes that we heard through that engagement, I'll walk through a few of them here. At a kind of shared regional level across both the CVRD and SRD and the full CSWM, we saw kind of 5 topics float to the top most often. The first was interest in seeing expanded curbside and organics collection to reduce reliance on private haulers. We heard interest in more convenience around drop-off options for yard waste and glass and flexible plastic, so things not collected at the roadside. We heard across the bar, I'll feel very repetitive about this one, lots of comments about interest in improved and continued education and communication, particularly around what materials are accepted and how recycling is processed. There was a lot of support for greater reuse and repair opportunities like free stores and repair cafes, and nonprofit pickup programs definitely saw wide support. And then interest in fairness and consistency in the regional services, both in delivery and cost and what's available to people. In urban areas, we saw some particular focus on convenience for materials that are not accepted at curbside, so people wanting to find kind of more convenient ways to be able to deal with glass and flexible plastics. An example being the idea of upgrading or reinstating a depot in Comox. Transparency, there was lots of questions about just costs and fees, which some felt to be inequitable, and interest too around enforcement and how that can be more clearly laid out for people. And also interest in the fairness of services. So seeing roadside pickup for places like multifamily and apartments when we're talking about an urban setting, and access to depots within those urban centers as well. And then for rural areas, we also saw improved access, so support for accessible depots, interest in expanded or seasonal collection, so around things like yard waste, and wide support for expanded curbside service in electoral areas that are seeing some costly private collection right now. There was interest in more diversion options, so local drop-off options or adding organic drop-offs to current depots in rural areas or electoral areas. And then again, a real focus around interest in engagement and public education through schools, through tours, lots of great ideas, but definitely an interest around that. So the other key tool was the online survey. As I mentioned, it was open from the beginning of September to mid-October. The structure of the survey really focused on a limited amount of demographic questions. We knew it would be a pretty heavy survey, so we wanted to make it easy for people to jump in and participate. So we asked kind of the most important ones: where they live, what type of home they live in, businesses, whether they were answering as a business or a resident. It was broken down by strategy. Each strategy started out with that kind of individual strategy board to give an overview of what people would be looking at. And then they were asked to rate on a 5-point scale from do not support to strongly support what their level of support was for each of the actions. An open question was also included for each of the strategies. So a rating question for each of the actions, an open question for each of the strategies. And none of the support questions, so the rating questions, were mandatory. So people could choose whether or not they weighed in on their level of support for each one. So we, as I said, 624 respondents, almost all of them answered as residents. 98.7 identified themselves as responding that way. 85% were in single family homes or duplexes. And then we have a further breakdown there in the slides. Nearly half of the participants here learned about the survey through social media. This is always helpful for us to know how to best promote things in the future. But about 10% came from the events as well. So those events also help drive participation in the online survey. And then just one note, at some community events, at all the community events, we had hard copies of the same survey that was presented online. At some of them, people chose to complete them, like the gentleman in the photo here, in person and leave them with the staff. And in those cases, those surveys were brought back and manually inserted into the online survey. So if they completed a hard copy survey at the event, that was then included and is a part of our summary for the online results. So on the online survey side, we saw a stronger representation from the Comox Valley Regional District area than the Strathcona Regional District area. Sorry, off my sheet. So the numbers were 400. My apologies. Over 400 from the Comox Valley Regional District compared to about 190 from the Strathcona Regional District. You can see here that Courtenay and Area C were definitely the stronger respondents from the CVRD and generated a lot of the feedback, but there's a good representation of numbers through the other areas as well. And then for the Strathcona Regional District, definitely the strongest outcome with Campbell River. But then we have the Oyster Bay and Quadra and Cortez group also kind of being very close in their numbers as well. And I hesitate with this bar graph just because it maybe suggests more participation from members of the First Nations that were included in the list than there was. So our long blue bar there is actually just a couple of respondents and the other ones are one. So that was, yeah, but we wanted to make sure that we included that as part of our summary here as well. So we as I mentioned, we invited people to rank on a 5-point scale their level of support. And I also mentioned that people did not have to weigh in on every one of the actions. Despite that, we really saw a high response level for the action ranking or rating questions, I should say. So it was pretty common for there to be 600 plus respondents for each of the action questions. Of 624 completing the survey overall. So not a lot of people skipped many of the action questions in general, but of the actions that were the most popular based on the weighted average, we found that there was a highest interest in requiring new multifamily buildings to have space for recycling and organics bins and pickup. There was interest in advocacy to increase access to recycling programs and expand the materials that are accepted under provincial regulations for waste producers. Interest in starting organics collection in multifamily buildings, interest in advocacy and promotion around existing reuse establishments, and also reviewing service standards and materials, depots, collection events, so that more people can access waste and recycling services. So really, we're seeing consistency here in feedback that people want more opportunities to divert more, and those seem to go to the top. On the other end of the scale, this is kind of our least supported actions. So just for perspective here, the dark blue and kind of ocean blue on the left are do not support or low support, and then that teal green is neutral. So that's kind of the fire break between support and non-support. So on the weighted scale, we saw that the least supported actions were around licensing all large waste management facilities without required recycling or diversion targets. This also had one of the highest levels of neutral responses. So it raises some question about maybe understanding on that action. There was interest in adding, a higher amount of low support for adding user pay waste drop-off options at select recycling depots, or introducing a clear garbage bag policy. There was also a higher level of low support for providing funding support to deconstruction projects, and the licensing of all waste haulers to provide reduced tipping fees for further kind of data and enforcement. It is interesting though, although these have the higher levels of do not support or low support, they all have more support on the other side above the neutral line. So even our top one there has kind of 27.7% on the do not support, low support side, and the two support sides still achieve 31%. And so then we had a few just themes, and I'm gonna let Sarah dive in more to kind of outcomes from the written comments and some highlights that were found in the results of the survey. But in general, we saw continued comment about support for consistent and fair services for waste and recycling across all the communities in the CSWM area. A continued support for reuse opportunities like free stores and repair cafes, and a focus and interest in education. And then finally, lots of comments about finding cost-effective, locally managed and accessible programs that can expand recycling and hold producers accountable. So people really kind of two-sided, wanting to reduce the waste that gets to the consumer through lobbying, and also create more kind of producer paid opportunities so that the waste that does get to the consumer can be handled more appropriately. So with that, I will pass it over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Colleen. So you can see it was definitely a very comprehensive consultation, right across our service area. I think we're really pleased with the participation. Looking back at how our 2012 plan was undertaken, we've definitely gone and exceeded that standard that we set during our last solid waste management plan, and I think we're doing well, even against some of our other regional districts. So I wanted to provide this opportunity to go a little bit into each of the actions, because moving forward, we're going to take this feedback from the public, and with your consent, incorporate these ideas into our draft plan. So that is our next step. That's what I'm working on now. So this is your time as a board to speak if there are some actions that you feel didn't receive the support, or that you don't want to see move forward. This would be the time to bring that up. So just speaking to comments here. So as Colleen mentioned, there was an open forum available at the end of each of the sections. And you can see that, people stayed consistently throughout participating in that and providing feedback. Certainly solid waste tracking was a bit of a tricky one for folks. On the support reuse initiatives, the one that I do want to highlight on this one is number 3 there with the provide $1 per permanent resident to volunteer organizations and local governments who run remote share sheds. So seeing a little bit less support there, I wanted to understand if there was a rural and urban divide in terms of the support for that. The other 2 actions there had strong support. On that third action, when I drilled down into the data, you could see that the rural and urban really were fairly consistent in terms of their support, a little bit lower on the strong, but overall it wasn't a case of people not wanting to fund those rural share sheds. There was a strong understanding of the value of that, and if anything, asking for more of that within the urban areas. On strategy 2, this one's around encouraging repair. We had a lot of backing for people wanting us to continue doing this work, supporting schools and community programs. I would say that there was perhaps a bit of a misunderstanding as to what a repair cafe was, and that was maybe an oversight and an assumption on our part. Some people really thought it had to do with coffee and that we were going to be opening up a coffee shop. And so you can understand some of that neutrality and the responses when you read through the comments a little bit, and can appreciate that maybe that's a concept that we needed to explain better to the public. In terms of funding concerns, there was mixed views, support for producer funding, modest public funding, some opposition to new taxes. But really people did understand the concept that repair is, it reduces waste, it creates jobs and fosters that local resilience. So there was overall strong support for these 4 actions. On strategy 3, as you can imagine, well supported. This comes up time and time again in all of our conversations with the public. And I was pleased to be able to attend a number of the events and speak with people in person. People really feel it's essential. There is definitely some folks out there that feel that we need to get to their partners, their significant others. Always that messaging that recycling isn't worthwhile. That's a challenge to overcome. But making it easier, driving convenience, and really wanting to push this further beyond the household and bring it into communities and see more recycling consistency in public spaces as well. Strategy 4 around multifamily waste reduction and reflecting back on Colleen's slide showing the most supported actions, and remembering and reflecting that 85% of the people that completed this survey were single family home owners. So they really want to see improved access and convenience for their neighbors in multifamily buildings as well. And so that's really positive to see, and it's definitely an area where we can see a lot of improvement. In terms of the multifamily, there's opportunities there for collaboration with our municipal partners in terms of requiring those new multifamily buildings, and we're seeing more appetite for that. But again, just a lot of people wanting to see support for recycling and organics in the future for multifamily. For strategy 5, there's quite a few actions associated with this one. These first 3 here, you can see the use landfill material bans and differential tipping fees to incentivize waste minimization and diversion. So reflecting back on the comments for this particular action, a lot of them drove back that comment that our director made earlier around the tip fees increasing relating to an increase in illegal dumping. And people felt that increasing those fees would result in that. I have gone back and spoken to our bylaw officer and looking at the implementation of our bylaw program that really took a big shift in 2016, 2017. That's where that jump in illegal dumping reports happens. You can see that we've had a steady increase in our tip fees since 2019, and we've had just a steady decrease in our illegal dumping reports over that same time period. So that the anecdotes are out there that people think that that's really what's driving. But as Michael said, you know, changing the price of a carton of milk doesn't make people steal it all of a sudden. People who steal, steal. People who throw things in the bushes, throw things in the bushes. You know, that $10 minimum isn't the barrier for folks. It's just their values and their morals that are driving them to do that. So we don't feel that that really is a factor in that decision making. A couple other strategies here around reducing IC&I waste, reduction and diversion. So the clear garbage bag policy to reduce safety issues and encourage diversion. We did hear directly from a couple of people who had lived in jurisdictions where this had been implemented, and they were both supportive in the comments section. It's definitely not a common practice, and so it is interesting that we have a couple people in our community that have been in those situations. Overall, you can understand people's concerns were around privacy, trying to understand, you know, how that would work, and making sure that there'd be opportunities for privacy. We would afford them a privacy bag. It's a small opaque bag within a clear bag, and you know, you can see from the materials that Colleen provided, we were trying to hold a very long conversation with people in a very short amount of time. And so trying to distill, you know, what were 10-page memos into a single page was very difficult. And so wherever that opportunity presented itself, we would have those longer conversations with people in those 1,200 interactions we had in person. But through the survey, we understood we can only capture people's attention for so long. So yeah.
It's not just me.
Yeah. All right, strategy 6. Sorry, I'm a bit under the weather here. Construction, renovation, and demolition, everyone's favorite topic. So there's definitely quite a few policies that we put forward to tackle this one. And there was, you know, strong support for them. Some felt, again, you know, if you're not in that industry, maybe you're more neutral about it. Maybe they're not involved in renovations in their homes. But they did make that connection about, you know, housing costs, affordability, certainly, you know, increasing red tape and regulation, and wanting to make sure that we weren't going to be stymieing development. So there was definitely an acknowledgement of that. And then for these last 4, again, going back to, you know, delaying housing, affordability, but really seeing broad support for material reuse and salvage. People understand that, you know, deconstruction is complex, but that there could be benefits to implementing that if it's tied together with faster permitting and better site coordination. A lot of folks in favor of furthering the education piece and looking for those locally driven practical solutions. We start to get into these more difficult concepts as we get further down the road, but we're grateful that we were able to contain people's attention and have them continue to participate. But you can see the results get a little bit more haphazard here. On number 28, add a user pay waste drop-off option at select recycling depots. If you read that really quickly, it might imply that we're going to start charging to drop off recycling. And that is how some people interpreted it. So through the comments, that's how it was understood. The people that were opposed generally felt that this was going to be asking for people to pay to drop off recycling rather than what it is, which is having the option at a recycling depot where your recycling is free to bring a bag of garbage that you would pay for that bag of garbage and drop it off. You wouldn't necessarily weigh it in. It would be similar to how it is at Hornby, where it's a per bag cost. So again, you know, lesson learned, those words matter, and we can appreciate where that misunderstanding came from. On advanced solid waste tracking, this is definitely where we lost a few people. The large waste management facilities, that strong neutral bar there, the commentary around there was just really people saying, I don't think this applies to me. You know, I I don't understand how this is going to impact me as a resident. So I can appreciate that. And we hope to be able to make people understand it a bit better through, additional consultation that would take place through the implementation of future bylaws surrounding these particular concepts. So just wanted to go into a bit more detail and make sure that folks had an opportunity to see that granularity before we move forward in some of our draft planning preparations. A couple of topics that I wanted to touch on that came up, agricultural plastics. So a number of conversations came up around agricultural plastics and contrasting them with the way that ocean plastics have been managed. So, we do feel like maybe it was something that was missing from the plan, and we'd like to put forward an opportunity to include some language within there around actions to manage that. So it is not a funded program like ocean plastics has been. It's certainly a bit on the edge right now as to whether that ocean plastics will be continued to be funded. But there's examples of some regional districts that have done some pilot programs with clean farms across the country, and there's extended producer responsibility programs for agricultural plastics that have been implemented in other provinces that really set an example. So we do think there's some opportunity within our region to provide that. What we're up against, though, in a challenging conversation is when you talk to farmers and you ask them how they manage their plastics now, they sort of look at the ground and shuffle their feet. And they recognize that their option for management is free. They're not bringing it to the landfill and disposing of it. They're either burning it or burying it on their properties. And so it's difficult to compete with that. So the option that we would have to provide, would probably need to be subsidized by the service in order for us to compete, to have them even loaded up into a truck. As you see, they don't own those dump trucks, and to compress it and compact it. So there's some costs to both parties to participate in this, but there is a market and an available recycling option, but at a cost. So it's something that we do want to explore and put some language within the plan to consider that in the next 10 years. So we just went through, looked at some of the agricultural activities happening in the Strathcona Regional District, and can see it's really around forage and pasture, and aquaculture, of course, significant, which sort of is a blend there of your ocean plastics and your agricultural plastics. And then in the Comox Valley, there's an agricultural plan that was recently developed, and there's 5 points there that speak to solid waste management opportunities. And I think that we could incorporate those, within our plan. Many of them are no-cost initiatives that fall under existing actions. The one that I see is 4.54 there, partnering with Clean Farms to launch a small-scale pilot project to recycle plastic bale wrap. That would have cost implications. So that's something that we can look at exploring and bring back as an option for the board. But yeah, ingraining that and recognizing the barriers that our agricultural partners have, I think would be welcomed. And then just lastly, reflecting on support for First Nations. So that response rate, that low response rate, I don't think it's necessarily in opposition to what we're saying, but just really not seeing themselves directly reflected in the materials brought to date and how they can be incorporated into this plan. So we're looking for language that we'll be including in that draft and circulating that within communities and getting their feedback on that before including it. And consideration, of course, for formal or informal arrangements going forward. So we'll leave it there and then reflect back before we move forward into engagement going forward.
All right, thanks so much. I'm just looking around and I see Director Arbor, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks and congrats to the staff for really your success in engaging the communities in the past year, and that's evidenced by the response you've had, as you mentioned. I'm still a little bit. I'll just have a couple of feedback, but I'm still even my own work, I don't do it, so I can't really criticize others for not doing it. The problem with our sampling of people is it's not random sample, like it's self-selected sample. And I think that might have caught us sometimes, for example, when we did the garbage pickup collection in rural areas a few years ago, where you tend to get the keeners come to the booth and talk to you. And so as I'm reading now, I'll get into the meat of the matter. As I'm reading item 30, which speaks about, seems to show 55-60% support for pickup in some of the rural areas. That's encouraging, but I'm hoping we don't get caught again with this. And there's a lot riding on it. We've been waiting for the solid waste management plan. There's a lot of initiatives, I think, that I've waited for the conclusion of it, including that one to happen. I'm still have residents on Spence Road ask me, why didn't we do an extension of the pickup service from Royston? They've been asking for it for 6 years, and we keep saying, oh, you know, let's even though it's 10 homes, it's like, let's wait for the SWMP project to be done. There's a lot of interest in Union Bay as well. So I'm hoping that, unfortunately for staff, I know you probably want to kind of take a deep breath after this is done, but I think this is where we'll have to put the foot on the accelerator for some of that pending demand that we've seen. And regarding the agricultural and ocean plastics, that's really great to see that highlighted in your presentation. And as you know, we now have an agricultural coordinator in the Comox Valley. I think it'll probably be hard for that person to really prioritize which activities to focus on, but this would be this is one I would support definitely for us to try to look at what is a very thorny issue in sectors that are not economically rich. And it was the same thing with shellfish, but I think the push by different people over time to get that going has made an impact. I'm sad to hear there may be changes there, but at Ag, we're still on ground zero on addressing that issue, and it would really be great to at least identify a couple of pathways that could be palatable to agricultural producers. So overall, a great plan, but I look forward to when the plan is signed off and see, especially on Action 30, but also some others, what we can do to enhance our outcomes in the Comox Valley and the rest of the CSWM area. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Director Harper, and I'll go to Director Moore.
Great, thanks, Chair. Yeah, thank you for this really great report. So much work. Yeah, I acknowledge what Director Arbor says around sort of the randomized sampling, although the home show that would be less randomized, I guess, in terms there'd be more of a capturing people where they are, who are, you know, not necessarily the keeners per se. I guess my question is around, there was a lot to absorb in the report, but in terms of lots of great support for initiatives such as the repair cafes and also increased education and all these things that probably residents don't see as traditional costs associated with managing their waste. I mean, they see, oh, we need to pay the people who pick up the waste and, you know, pay for the infrastructure, et cetera. But these are all extra costs that I'm seeing a lot of support for. So I guess the question is around whether there was much commentary around that acknowledgement that a lot of these strategies involve are not necessarily, you know, it's not a bare bones kind of service. Obviously acknowledging that all these things are going to help us save costs, but people don't always think that way.
The accountant has a few questions and
yeah, so just whether there was any commentary or reflection on the fact that a lot of these things that are being supported are going to cost more. although there's still a lot of support. Sorry, I got a bit distracted there.
Yeah, understandable. In the appendices, there's a picture of all the information that was provided to folks, and one of those was a cost board. So we did provide folks an estimated cost per household for the implementation of all of these actions so that they could understand that. So I think that the reaction to that was generally quite positive. But I appreciate the self-selection comment, and I do think that you're right, that where we sort of intercepted people at places like the Home Show or the Oyster River or the Waste Management Center, rather than asking people to come to us, if we went to them, then we did get a much more randomized selection in a lot of those conversations. So yeah, generally I wouldn't say that cost came up as much as I anticipated it to, and really not so often. And usually if raised, was in support.
Great. I mean, it's encouraging that that these strategies are being supported, recognizing that they will be additional costs that are not traditionally part of the service. Thank you.
All right, and Director Grebe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Outstanding work, you guys. Fantastic survey, top-notch graphics, all that stuff. I know that, we have a catchment area of about 120,000 total, rough and ready. So you pretty well got a sample rate there about 1.5%. That's pretty good. One thing I've learned in my time in politics is where we seem to be stuck in the route of developing policy according to who shows up or who fills in the paperwork. My question, I guess, was around. I mean, I don't think you track this, but what you're feeling about demographics of the people that took the survey, related to their age and related to the socioeconomic positions. Was there any feeling that there was underrepresentation from the famous Gen Z and area, the 20 something, early 30 somethings, were they represented as well? Do you think it was pretty tipped heavily to people like me, in the baby boomer section? So just I know it's not scientific, but what was your feeling?
Yeah, we
out there
didn't collect that
in the
data
trenches?
specifically, so maybe you can speak broadly, Colleen, to kind of typical participation in online surveys, because we didn't collect age data.
We did not, no. Did I turn this on?
Nope, you're on.
And kind of intentionally so, those are conversations that we have when we're setting up a survey. Kind of how much do we ask of people before we kind of get them to the meat of the topic? And so, they're active conversations, and in this case, the location and the housing were priorities that were identified. So, just from experience, on other engagements where questions like that are answered. I mean, engagement generally does still tip to, folks 50 plus. It just tends to be people who have a bit more time and capacity to be able to participate more actively. And so it's, across all engagements, something that is under consideration and that we're kind of actively trying to find ways to work around. What I would say kind of a benefit for what here was the community events and the opportunities for outreach that we found there. And so obviously we mentioned things like the Home Show. That also would probably be a bit more of a specific demographic, but Lindsay's booths at community events throughout the area would definitely were ways of being able to try and target, like, parents and families and younger people that would be participating there. So those decisions were made fairly deliberately to be able to try and reach folks there. And I think if if we had tracked it more, so this is a bit more anecdotal, I think you would see a more of a balance in terms of the interactions at those in-person events.
We lured them in with stickers.
Yeah, there's stickers.
That was key. Stickers are key to a
Themed
booth
booths and lots of
success.
good stuff, yeah.
I'd say the one inference I could make maybe is seeing that percentage of single family homes.
Mhm.
You know, recognizing there's more renters probably in the multifamily, there's more new Canadians in the multifamily. So that's kind of where you can see maybe that missing demographic. Is that fair?
Yeah.
All right, thanks. And I just wanted to just highlight one chart that I thought was particularly revealing. There's obviously a lot of information here, and this one unfortunately isn't based upon the survey. It was the tipping fees versus illegal dumping reports. I thought that was really, really enlightening. And it seems like there's almost an inverse relationship. The more you increase tipping fees, the fewer reports of dumping we get. And I guess I had two questions related to that. One is, since those are reports, I would assume that's not impacted by level of service of enforcement of by law, going out investigating these things. These are simply reports that come into us, so they wouldn't be affected by our level of capacity to respond to them. And the second question is, there seems to be was this massive spike that happened between 2016 and 17, where the tipping fees remained constant and the amount of illegal dumping like quintupled. Did you have any observations on what was behind that? Because that seems to be the single biggest change on the entire chart and is unrelated to tipping fees.
Yeah, there was an introduction of an illegal dumping bylaw at that time that changed our enforcement practices, and I think subsequently changed the way we reported. So I think it's related to that, not necessarily what happened in the field. So, and I think that's also part of that trend is that there was, perhaps awareness raised through that campaign when the illegal dumping campaign was launched by Stephanie Valdal at that time, that people, maybe recognized a site that they knew about and reported it. And so as more of those, old sites got cleaned up, then, hopefully there's sort of less inclination for people to keep dumping. So, yeah.
And since 2017, have our policies and the way we've implemented them been fairly constant?
Yeah.
So from 2017 onwards, it's a like for like comparison year to year after that one adjustment. Okay, well, thank you. That's just, anyway, it would be very useful in future discussions. I believe we're just on receipt.
We actually have more presentation, if you can believe it.
Okay.
I know we crammed a lot into this one report, but we saved you from
All right,
reading multiple staff
Sarah,
reports.
take it away.
Yeah. So Ingrid Sly is going to present for you now on what our look forward is. So what we're going to be doing in step 4 for our public engagement over the spring.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for staying with me here. We've got only 2 slides, so. There we go. So for step 4, as we saw here, is presenting the draft plan. So once the draft plan is ready to be put out to the public, our engagement approach for this next step will be very scaled back from what you've seen throughout the solid waste management plan engagement. We are going to focus most of our energy online, and we're going to do this for a few reasons, but the primary one is that we have a very short engagement window for this. We are doing it only for 3 weeks as opposed to 6 or 8. And we also saw through our previous engagements that a lot of people who are coming to us were coming from online. So we're going to focus our energies on that. We're also going to be presenting the draft plan in a summarized, kind of more animated version through a video. So this video is going to be used, or it's going to be the primary tool for educating folks on what we're presenting in the draft plan, and it's going to be found on the website. So the goal is to let people know that the draft plan is ready and that we are ready to hear their input. But that being said, the input, we don't anticipate there being that much. People really let us know in step 3 and step 3B what they wanted to see in that draft plan, and this is simply us presenting it to them. The digital, as I mentioned, was the most effective way to communicate, but we also have rural residents that we also want to reach out to. So to that effect, we're going to be using direct mail to access our rural communities, including islands and Tassis, Sabalis, Sayward, etc. The consultation window will be this April from the 7th to the 24th, and we will be presenting a What We Heard report about step 4 in May, June, along with the draft plan.
All right, and a few final questions. We have one from Director Bacala.
Yeah, thanks. Something that occurred to me in looking at kind of the range of support and questions and how popular the neutral category was, depending on how complex the question was, made me wonder how much of that neutral is actually I don't know, or I don't have an opinion. And so I'm wondering if in our next round of engagement, we would maybe consider having some kind of category like that can capture when the person who's answering the survey just doesn't understand the context, or doesn't, for whatever reason, really doesn't have an opinion, or doesn't have enough information to have an opinion, as opposed to being truly neutral, that they legitimately have all the information and don't have an opinion about it. So because I think having a don't know category in the previous round of engagement might have really highlighted what questions were just difficult information to convey in a survey. That's my question, comment. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that that's a really great reflection, and I think that incorporating something like that moving forward would be excellent, rather than just having it be neutral, having an, either having neutral as well as an I don't know or I need more information would be really beneficial to us, especially when we're asking such detailed questions and trying to drill down to how people really feel about them. So absolutely.
All right, I don't see any questions in the room, and I'm just ask staff to check to see if there's any online. Okay. Director Chapman, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still late in raising the hand there. A question I had is, in developing these questions, did we engage the services of a sociologist to help compose the question to eliminate areas of ambiguity?
Look at Colleen to speak to that.
No, we did not. We did not engage a sociologist on developing the survey questions. The survey questions were developed with us as a public engagement firm and the staff team, based on the actions that were identified from the board here to be able to present. And so there were definitely a lot of conversations and cooperation, and trying to kind of boil down, as Sarah mentioned, what were big, long, complex topics into kind of easy questions to be able to be presented to the community for understanding. But it was, developed based on the experience from our work on many different engagements, blended with the technical expertise of the CSWM team.
So the answer is no, right?
Yeah, around the sociologist for sure.
Did you have a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Director Chapman. And go to Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. And while thank you for this report, it was a lot to take in, and it was great. I did read it, but I'm also really happy for you to present it because it gets into my brain even better then. And I was really happy to, read the feedback themes about the need for clear communication and education, because that's something that I hear from people about, wondering if they're putting something in a bin and it's just kind of fake, like what is actually going to happen to that product that I'm looking after. And so I'm really happy, because I think that maybe we'll be working on that some more in the future. And it also really aligns with the waste audit, which we're going to talk about next. I was also really happy to read about the desire for consistent, affordable services for all communities. and convenient drop-off locations for yard waste. Because those are things that I specifically hear from in the constituents that I represent. And yard waste and also regular garbage waste is something that I hear about. And my question is just around I know you're talking about the islands as if they're like the rural areas, but in the Discovery Islands and mainland inlets, there's a lot of folks, including businesses, who are maybe you would actually characterize them as remote. And they have different needs and different systems for dealing with their waste. And I'm curious if there was any connection with those type of operators during this survey, or if there's been any consideration um, for the specific needs that folks like that will have or do have.
We definitely saw some responses from people that from the comments, you could tell they were from the outer Discovery Islands. I can't speak to whether they were business owners or not, but there certainly was some inclusion and participation from those folks. You can see there's nothing really specifically within any of these actions that are directly towards a specific community. And I think that's kind of intentional to allow for those conversations to happen, at the board level and the staff level. So I think, yeah, if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. And I also just wanted to sort of reference or reflect on what Director Morin said earlier, because I think asking people for their opinions on what we should be doing or what best practices are, what they'd like to see included to increase diversion is excellent. However, when it's accompanied with a dollar figure on every single checkbox that they're choosing, that I think that can really change the responses. So I think I don't know if there's a possibility of including cost analysis when you're putting out the draft plans. People can really have that information to correlate with. So I think it's easy for people, and I'm saying that from this perspective of having seen other surveys that have been done where, of course, we want all of the things, but do we want all of the things when we know how much they're going to cost?
And each of the actions did have a cost implication, a range associated with it that was available when they responded. So they could see that at the time of their response.
And will that be included in the draft plan survey as well?
It'll be presented differently in the draft plan. Yeah.
But it will be there available.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right, this has been quite a robust discussion. It's funny, I thought we'd be ending by around 11:30 today, or earlier. So I think there's a recommendation here. If someone cares to move that on report number 3. Thank you. That's moved and seconded. Any discussion on the recommendation? Is anyone opposed? And that carries. And because we have gone on so long, staff have ordered pizza and it just arrived. So I'm going to suggest we take a really brief break, let's say back by 20 after, and we'll get this thing wrapped up hopefully by 1. All right. Thanks, everyone. Folks online will be about 2 minutes. Thanks for your patience. All right, I'll just ask directors to take their seats if they can. And I realize Sarah's in the kitchen, so I'm going to get, oh, no, she's right there. Okay, perfect. So next item is report number 2, the 2025 waste composition study, and I'll take a motion for receipt. Thank you very much. That's moved and seconded. And I will just go briefly ask the people in the kitchen to come on through. Great. Thanks. And I'll pass this to our CAO, who I imagine will pass it over to Sarah. Thanks.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. And Sarah Willie, Manager of Solid Waste Planning and Policy Development, will be introducing the report on your 2025 waste composition study. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you. Through the CAO to the chair. It's been a while, and I appreciate your patience in the results of this study. We undertook it in March, April of 2025. And this is our initial comparison of 2017 to 2025. So, right off the top, you see a bigger gray bar, which is your building materials bar. And what that represents is really, we made the decision to include samples at Northwind this time. Recognizing that the landfill, that's private landfill that's adjacent to our facility in Campbell River, is part of our overall system. We do see less construction demolition waste coming through the transfer station, especially since we put limits on the size of the containers that can come in. But what that did was added significant increase in tonnage overall for that construction sector. So I will give you this with a grain of salt in that we've asked the consultant to go back and to use our 2025 sector data, which we're quite excited about. You may recall last January, we launched a new scale software system, and that's given us additional granularity in the way that we can present this information. So we'll use our 2025 scale data and we'll remove Northwind, and we'll be able to make a better apples to apples comparison. So we'll be bringing that back in 2026, but for now, this is the data that we have. So I think that increase in that building materials component within the bar, which is because Northwind is included, has kind of squished some of the other ones. So I don't want to shout from the rooftops just yet about that organics reduction from 25 to 17%. But you will see some great wins in the sector by sector comparisons. Time of year was different, but we did look at that, and I think it's comparable, spring versus fall. We used a different consultant, so they do have to look at how they've categorized other, for example. I think we had less materials in the other category than we did in 2017. And then, as I mentioned, the changes to scale data. But overall, fairly comparable. On the food waste reduction side, some real wins. So we saw a reduction here in that municipal 3-stream automated collection for Courtney Comox had the lowest amount of compostable organics out of any of the sectors that we looked at. And that's really positive. This is one of the policy changes or program implementations that we're really looking to measure. And we see a lot of benefits there. There's still some room for improvement in the Campbell River Cumberland combined. I think another caveat that really I should put out there is, this data is always going to be a snapshot in time. It was expensive to get this data. It would be astronomically expensive to get perfect data. So try not to hang your hat on, very specific numbers, and think of it really as an overall snapshot. And that's part of the reason why we combined communities here, is to really show, the most number of samples by collection type, is what we're trying to convey here. What you do see is still quite a bit of plastic and plastic packaging, as well as paper and paper packaging. So these are all communities that also have curbside recycling, as well as curbside organics. So we're still seeing a significant amount of recyclables that are in this stream. And this is specifically the waste that's being picked up at the curb from single-family homes. We wanted to look a little bit further. So we've got this collection stream comparison. And this is for a number of different sectors. So that top one there, IC&I and multifamily, again, is still a commingled waste stream. So those front-loading bins, they'll pick up from multifamily and from businesses at the same time. So it's unfortunately, we can't segregate that. The RDO is residential drop-off bagged. So that's people who are coming to the Comox Valley Waste Management Center or the Campbell River Waste Management Center to self-haul their garbage. And then they were asked to set it aside, and then those bags were opened up and sampled. Rural CSWM facilities are our transfer stations, Gold River, Cortez, and Hornby. So those bins, when they were brought to the Cumberland landfill, those were set aside and sampled. Subscription garbage is our electoral area residents who have signed up for private collection. And so we set those trucks aside. Muni garbage only is some of our smaller communities that only have garbage pickup. They don't have recycling or organics pickup. Pickup is kind of a loose term there. Some of them just have bare bins, and they'll drop their garbage in their local bare bin that's on the street. And then we have municipal 2-stream manual, that's really Royston, and then the 3-stream manual and automated that we saw on the last slide. It's a bit of a brain twist, but you want the biggest black bar that you can have. The bigger the black bar, the better. Because this is the garbage, and we want to see garbage in the garbage. We don't want to see recycling in the garbage. We don't want to see organics in the garbage. Depot materials are the sorts of things like pop cans or light bulbs or batteries that you would take. And then drop-off items are things like clean wood waste or scrap metal, things that you might have to take to a waste management center rather than a bottle depot. So still a substantial amount of divertible materials really in all of our streams, but our highest performer is definitely our municipal 3-stream automated service. And that's through the partnerships with the municipalities. We do see a low amount of organics in the rural CSWM facilities, which is positive, probably attributing to a lot of backyard composting and, larger properties, people having that opportunity and being of that mindset. But again, these are general trends and will depend on which bags we open that day. But overall, the lowest performer there is really kind of that muni garbage only, where, the most convenient option is to throw it in the garbage, and that the recycling for them is getting in a vehicle and going to a recycling depot, whereas the garbage is just walking down the street and dropping that off. And organics opportunities for them are often quite limited due to bear conflicts. We've tried to establish some composting facilities in some of those communities, but again, it does take a level of effort. Another area we dug into was IC&I single source loads. So these are businesses that have enough waste generated that they have their own bin, so they don't become commingled. So it's easier to target and understand where the origin of the waste is. So for here, we had a number of grocery store samples, and a significant amount of organics was found in those samples. And that aligns with anecdotal evidence as well. The other businesses was a combination of a hardware store, a thrift store, and a ski resort. I won't tell you which ski resort. Yeah. And you can see it's a bit more of a mixed load, you know, more in line with what you'd see from residential, but certainly still a lot of opportunity for diversion coming out of there. So there's a lot of opportunity to target those sole source loads because your communication initiatives can really go back to the source easily. So we've got some areas for improvement there. A little frustrating to continue to see these extended producer responsibility materials, these recyclable materials in the waste stream. And I think it's surprising to the ministry even to still see this much in there. So Recycle BC's been in place since 2014 now. It's over 10 years. It's starting to enter into that mature phase. But we still see, even in our single family homes, which have that, that opportunity to recycle, almost 19% of the waste stream being Recycle BC materials. So, you know, when you amplify that into a tons, and then you look at how many tons we recycled almost 6,000, but we potentially threw away 2,800 just from single family homes. So we probably threw out as much Recycle BC material as we recycled. So there's still a lot of opportunity for those materials that everyone thinks are ubiquitous and know what to do with. And we pass this information along to the ministry because it's important for them to see that if Recycle BC is reporting a recovery rate of 83%, but we can see within our own community that we're not at 83%, then potentially they're missing some tonnage on their denominator side. So they've got potentially some extra material that's in their system that they're not accounting for in order to inflate that reported recovery rate. And then there's some programs that don't even calculate a recovery rate and do continue to underperform, like electronics. And that's a frustrating one for us too. So some policy work that we've done there that this is supporting, and it's comparable to other jurisdictions as well. So we're not alone in this fight, and we're not alone in our performance. That's consistent with other regions that I looked at. Organics contamination was another area that we focused on that was new for 2025. So we asked them to look at the feedstock that was coming in from the 4 different jurisdictions and to really pull out that contamination, weigh it, count it, to categorize it based on its material type. And this is to help inform education for residents and also to help us to make sure that we have a product that we can sell. So while this overall contamination rate seems quite low, what's important to remember is that, if there's 12,000 tons of feedstock coming in, this is still 240 tons of contamination. And that's if there wasn't any organics stuck to that plastic bag, of which there is quite a bit of organics stuck to that plastic bag. And then when you look at it from a volumetric standpoint, it was about 3,600 cubic meters of contamination. So it's still significant. And that's material that we have to, haul back to dispose of in the landfill. And that, that's the best outcome. The bad outcome is if it just gets smaller and ends up in the final product, which you see, 33 pieces of contamination in every 100 kilograms of organics. They literally counted every fruit sticker for us, and it's a lot of fruit stickers. And those are the types of things that make it through. So we wanted that information to be able to pass on to our municipal partners, and we've sent that to them and hope that they can use that in their communication to residents. So overall, the study was conducted well. The Tetra Tech was a great consultant, and I think we've got some valuable information to help us to continue to support the policies that we've put forward through the solid waste management plan. Yeah, happy to have some questions.
All right, thanks so much, Sarah. And I see Director Arbor. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks. It's interesting on that last slide to see the impact of automatic collection versus manual collection. And I guess I'd have the same question in regards to garbage collection, whether actually it's bags. So yeah, it's probably just applies to the organics. My comment was on that. I spend about half a day a month thinking about waste management, and I know your team spends every day thinking about it. But when I was looking at slide 4 around the collection stream comparison and kind of the low figures, I live in a multi-family place, and it's clear that recycling is just absolutely terrible. We're still in the 80s there. And I was trying to link that in my head to our discussion around tipping fees. And I know this is a lot of private contractors, but yes, there's bringing solutions. Second is imposing solution, and third is making them pay way more on their tipping fees for terrible results. I'm wondering if that is something that is being considered as part of the solid waste management plan, because it's clear we need to do something in some of those obvious areas where there's been zero progress and there's currently zero incentive to owners or private garbage collectors to do anything about it.
Yeah, there's a couple lights at the end of the tunnel. Recycle BC has recently passed their program plan, so they do that every 5 years or so. And in their most recent plan, there will be more transparency around how many multifamily residents are actually being served at their building. So previously, they were sort of hiding behind saying that those multifamily residents were served because there was a depot in their community, and that was masking the number of multifamily buildings that actually had funded collection from their building. So for example, in Campbell River, it's listed in the program plan that Campbell River has funded multifamily collection. And when I inquired, there was only 4 buildings in all of Campbell River that had signed up and were being funded. And that's not apparent in their plan or their annual reporting. So there will be more transparency. The other way they're trying to make improvements is they have now offered a price for a commingled route. So as I mentioned, front loaders will go and they'll just do the most economical route because they're all private, right? So if they pick up from a small business and then they pick up from a multifamily and then they pick up from maybe a mixed residential and commercial building, all of that's going in the truck. Previously, that would have not been allowed to have been dropped off as Recycle BC material, any of the residential. But they now have a price point and a methodology for funding that mixed route. And so they think that will attract more private haulers into the space. I think one of the challenges is still contamination. So there's penalties, as you know, for contamination within recycling as well. And so those haulers are still responsible for communicating to those multifamily residents, and especially with a commingled IC&I, they're gonna be taking responsibility for that. And so we'll see how much uptake there is, but that's new as of last year. The other within the solid waste management plan, we have a couple of prongs of attack on this front. The mandatory source separation. So that's requiring all businesses and households to have their waste separated. How they manage it from there can still be through the private sector, but it allows the hauler to go to that multifamily building and say, you're required to have recycling. And so, here's the price. And then, of course, the more people that are asking for recycling, the lower the price will be. So that's the one area that we're looking at.
All right, and Director McCollum.
Yeah, thanks. Just wanted to pick up on the organics contamination numbers. And, something that caught my attention was your mention of fruit stickers. And obviously, these are small pieces of plastic that are not going to be filtered out and basically exist in the finished product. And so realistically, either the way that manufacturers make those stickers have to change, or the public needs to be reminded pretty frequently about the fact that they do not break down. I don't know. I don't know if I've even really heard them specifically singled out in our, like, I know the city of Courtenay puts out their own materials at the beginning of the year with the calendar. And I don't know if I even noticed fruit stickers on that list. And so, I mean, realistically, like, we gave out the green bins when we brought this on board. Would be good to just have a little reminder of these kind of things, like small pieces of plastic are the hardest to deal with, that maybe this is should be a flag for us in terms of where we need to focus communication, because I think that's a really good example of an area where people are likely thinking that they're doing exactly what is required and then missing kind of an important piece of it. So just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, that's why it's great we have our own communications resource now, because those things can be happening more easily. And I think we're gaining a lot of trust from our municipal partners, and we can collaborate through things like the Recollect app, and create some content that can be pushed out through that to folks. Something like that's pretty low cost. I'm speaking on behalf of Ingrid and giving her more work.
All right, and Director Mulwini.
Thank you, Chair. I have a comment not related to fruit stickers, but I guess my thought on the fruit sticker is there a way that we as a board can also advocate to the province and to manufacturers of fruit stickers and fruit companies that they should be making stickers that are compostable? Like, why are they plastic in the year 2025 or 2026? Here we are. But are they edible? My comment is really around grocery stores and food waste, and that graph showed that 53% of the grocery store sampled was food waste, and in the report it's talking about despite best efforts to divert the material to higher and better uses, it's like food banks or farms that it's not happening. And I guess I have a two-part question, because I'm curious if the effort that you mentioned in the report about diversion, is that the efforts of CSWM staff, or is that the efforts of grocery stores? And I will sort of just add that I farmed pigs for several years, and in my experience, any grocery store chain that I approached asking about food waste for feedstock, I was rebuffed because of corporate insurance regulations. And I was even told that, horses have been known to choke on a twist tie, and then the corporation gets sued. So what your report indicated was sort of saying that we need additional policy tools. And I'm wondering, and just kind of flagging, that I'm not sure if a policy would be a strong enough tool to exact the change that we're looking for in this food waste space with grocery stores. And I'm just curious if a consideration of a bylaw would be more appropriate, because if we are serious about food waste diversion from significant sources like grocery stores, then we may need something that a corporation actually has to listen to, which is a bylaw and not a policy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's the initiatives, first off, are mainly grocery store led and nonprofit led. So, working with the food banks and speaking with them, they receive significant quantities of materials from grocery stores right now. So we don't want to discount that effort that they're making and donating that. There's also initiatives like Food Mesh, where they can sort of as a go-between to farmers, help to reduce that liability and allow for some food that's no longer suitable for human consumption to move towards farms. One of the challenges that we see, though, is that the depackaging component becomes the responsibility of the receiver and not of the grocery store. And then once that packaging has moved into the space of agriculture, it's no longer part of the Recycle BC program. So it just creates problem after problem there. So yeah, we've had some of those conversations, but we do want to work there. I agree. I think looking at individual loads from grocery stores and potentially being able to set thresholds for the amount of organics that are allowable within loads could be a way to move forward. So much like we have for scrap metal or clean wood, we have thresholds above which it becomes contaminated load and there's a surcharge. There could be surcharges on loads for organics materials, but we have to be cognizant as well of the capacity limitations of our organics system and ensuring that, you know, we're not creating more demand than we can meet.
Did you have a follow-up? Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. Not seeing any further lights in the room. Can you just confirm there's no one online? Obviously, there are people online, but there's no one who wants to speak online. All right. Well, seeing no further questions, this was we're calling just for receipt. So anyone opposed to receipt? And that carries. All right, we'll move on to item 4, the CSWM resolution status reports, also for receipt. Thank you. Any questions on that? Any questions online? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? And that carries. So bylaws and resolutions, we're into the home stretch. Bylaw number 903, and this is for first, second, and it's for, sorry, first and second reading, then third reading, then final adoption. And thank you. And the final adoption will require 2/3 when we get to that. Anyone opposed to first and second readings? That carries. Thank you. Okay, third is seconded. Anyone opposed? That carries. And okay, the dramatic 2/3 vote. Anyone opposed to final adoption? And that carries. I know. Really impressive. And that, believe it or not, is the end of the agenda. Thank you, everyone. It was a bit of a full meeting. Okay, thanks very much. All right, see you soon, friends. Bye-bye. Move termination. Let's do that. Just to end this thing. Okay, no one is opposed. Thank you.